What would you sacrifice to keep a championship core together? Your future flexibility, your financial stability, or a talented young guard who never asked to be caught in the middle of ownership's budget crisis? The Boston Celtics, fresh off an off-season defined by ruthless financial maneuvering and cold-blooded roster decisions, find themselves staring down a luxury tax bill that would make even the wealthiest owners wince. Sitting approximately $12.1 million above the luxury tax threshold, they're facing a payment of roughly $39.5 million if they finish the regular season with their current roster intact. That's not just money. That's a small fortune being lit on fire for a team entering what insiders are calling a season of lower expectations. And right in the crosshairs of this financial firestorm, Anfernee Simons, the 25-year-old point guard who came to Boston in exchange for All-Star Jrue Holiday during an offseason that can only be described as a salary-slashing bloodbath. Now, according to Celtics insider Jay King, Simons isn't just a player on the roster. He's a trade chip waiting to be cashed in before the 2025-26 season concludes. But here's the question that should haunt every Celtics fan. When did championship organizations start treating talented young players like disposable assets in a spreadsheet? And more importantly, what does this say about Boston's actual commitment to competing at the highest level? To understand how we got here, we need to rewind to an off-season that will be remembered as one of the most financially aggressive in recent Celtics history. The front office, operating under new ownership that clearly has different priorities than their predecessors, embarked on a mission to slash salary with the precision of a surgeon and the mercy of a corporate raider. Jrue Holiday, the two-way maestro who had been instrumental in Boston's playoff runs, was shipped to Portland in exchange for Anfernee Simons. On paper, it looked like a talent-for-talent swap with financial implications. In reality, it was the opening salvo in what would become a systematic dismantling of the team's luxury tax obligations. Throughout the remainder of the offseason, Simons' name circulated in trade rumors with the consistency of a metronome. Every conversation, every reported phone call, every whispered negotiation seemed to include the young guard as a potential piece to be moved. Yet here we are, approaching the start of the season, and Simons remains on the roster, at least for now. The phrase, "at least for now," is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence. Because according to King's reporting, the Celtics' current roster configuration isn't sustainable. Not when you're staring down a $39.5 million luxury tax bill for what's being characterized as a transitional season. The math is brutal and unforgiving. Either move Simons and reduce the financial burden, or accept that you're paying championship-level taxes for a team that insiders don't believe is truly competing for a title. Let's break down the financial reality that's driving these decisions, because the numbers tell a story that's equal parts fascinating and depressing. The Celtics are $12.1 million above the luxury tax threshold. Not an insurmountable figure by any means, but enough to trigger significant penalties under the NBA's increasingly punitive tax system. That $39.5 million tax bill isn't just about this season. It's about the repeater tax, that dreaded mechanism that punishes teams for consistently operating above the luxury tax threshold. Every year you stay above the line, the penalties get steeper, the costs more prohibitive, the financial pain more acute. The Celtics, it seems, are trying to reset that clock to get back under the threshold and avoid the repeater penalties that could cripple their financial flexibility in future seasons. King's analysis cuts straight to the heart of the matter. If the Celtics can get themselves completely out of the luxury tax and begin the process of resetting the repeater tax, they should do it. That's not a suggestion. That's a directive from someone who understands the long-term financial implications of staying above the threshold. But here's where it gets interesting. Even if the Celtics can't find a trade that completely eliminates their tax burden, King argues they should still move Simons if it reduces salary, and he's not part of their long-term plans. Translation: Simons is expendable, a financial liability masquerading as a basketball asset, and the front office is actively looking for ways to unload him. Before we get too deep into the financial machinations, let's take a moment to appreciate what the Celtics would be trading away. Anfernee Simons isn't some washed-up veteran clinging to relevance or an unproven rookie who might never pan out. He's a legitimate NBA talent entering his prime years with a track record of consistent production. Last season with Portland, Simons averaged 19.3 points per game while dishing out 4.8 assists across 70 appearances. Those aren't empty stats accumulated on a tanking team. Okay, Portland was pretty bad, but Simons was genuinely productive. In the 2 seasons prior, he averaged over 20 points per game while shooting 43.9% from the field. That's legitimate scoring punch from the guard position, the kind of offensive production that most teams would kill to have. At 25 years old, Simons is theoretically entering his peak years. He's got experience, he's got skills, and he's shown the ability to be a primary option on offense when called upon. In a different universe, with a different ownership group, he'd be viewed as a building block, a player you construct around rather than jettison for financial relief. But this isn't that universe. This is a universe where the Celtics, despite their storied history and championship pedigree, are making decisions based on spreadsheets rather than basketball merit. And Simons, through no fault of his own, has become the poster child for this new reality. Here's where the Celtics' logic starts to crystallize, even if it's uncomfortable to acknowledge. Boston has legitimate roster needs that could theoretically be addressed by moving Simons. With Jayson Tatum's future uncertain, though that's a whole different can of worms, and a glaring lack of quality at the center position, the Celtics could use Simons as a trade chip to address multiple issues simultaneously. Imagine a scenario where Boston packages Simons with other assets to acquire a legitimate starting center, someone who can protect the rim, rebound, and provide the kind of interior presence that's been missing from their roster. Simultaneously, they reduce their luxury tax burden and reset the repeater clock. It's the kind of move that looks brilliant on a whiteboard in the front office, even if it feels soulless from a basketball perspective. The front court has been a persistent weakness for Boston, a vulnerability that savvy opponents have exploited in crucial playoff moments. If trading Simons allows them to shore up that weakness while also improving their financial position, the logic becomes harder to argue against, even if it feels like prioritizing accountants over athletes. King's prediction that Simons will be traded before the end of the 2025-26 season leaves a massive window of possibility. Are we talking about a trade deadline deal in February? A summer blockbuster? A midseason swap when a contender gets desperate? The ambiguity is intentional. The Celtics are playing a waiting game, monitoring the market, seeing what offers materialize, and determining when they can maximize Simons' value while minimizing their tax burden. They're not going to rush into a bad deal just to save money. At least we hope they're not, but they're also not committed to keeping Simons long-term. For now, Simons will suit up in Celtics green. He'll play meaningful minutes, contribute on both ends of the floor, and do everything asked of him professionally. The season opener against the Philadelphia 76ers on Wednesday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern will mark the beginning of what could be his only season in Boston, a brief stopover in a career that's taken him from Portland to an uncertain future. Step back from the Simons situation for a moment and consider what this entire scenario reveals about the modern NBA. We're watching a franchise with one of the richest histories in basketball, located in one of the wealthiest markets in America, making decisions driven primarily by luxury tax avoidance rather than championship pursuit. The new ownership group, whoever they are, clearly has different priorities than the previous regime. They're looking at the Celtics as a business first and a basketball team second. That's their right. They own the franchise, they can run it however they see fit. But it represents a fundamental shift in organizational philosophy that fans should understand and evaluate. This isn't about being cheap in the traditional sense. The Celtics will still spend money, still pay their stars, still invest in the roster. But they're drawing lines in the sand, establishing thresholds they won't cross, and making it clear that financial prudence matters as much as on-court success. In a season of lower expectations, as King characterizes it, that might be defensible. But what happens when the expectations rise again? Will ownership be willing to pay the luxury tax then? Or will we see another round of salary purges? Lost in all the financial analysis and trade speculation is a simple human reality. Anfernee Simons is a person, not a line item on a balance sheet. He came to Boston in a trade he didn't request, joining a team with an uncertain future and ownership that's already looking for ways to move him. That's got to be incredibly difficult to process, even for a professional athlete who understands the business side of the game. To Simons' credit, he's handled the situation with remarkable professionalism. He's shown up, put in the work, and according to reports, he knows exactly what he needs to improve this year. That's the mindset of someone who's not letting the uncertainty derail his preparation or performance. He's going to play his game, contribute to winning, and let the chips fall where they may. But make no mistake, this situation is far from ideal for a player trying to establish himself as a cornerstone piece. The constant trade rumors, the public acknowledgement that he's expendable, the knowledge that ownership views him primarily as a financial burden, all of that creates an environment that's less than conducive to peak performance. So is Jay King right? Will the Celtics trade Anfernee Simons before the end of the 2025-26 season? Based on everything we know about the franchise's financial situation, ownership's priorities, and the roster's construction, it's hard to argue against that prediction. The math is too compelling, the financial incentives too strong, the organizational direction too clear. Unless something dramatic changes, Simons becomes absolutely indispensable, the luxury tax rules get modified, ownership has a change of heart, he's going to be moved. It's not a question of if, but when and for what return. For Celtics fans, this represents a sobering reality check about where their franchise stands. This isn't the Celtics of old, the team that would do whatever it took to compete for championships regardless of cost. This is a new era, one defined by financial constraints and ownership groups that view luxury tax payments as unacceptable expenses rather than necessary investments in winning. Anfernee Simons will play basketball for the Boston Celtics this season. He'll contribute, he'll compete, and he'll do his job professionally. But he's also playing for his next team, wherever that might be, knowing that his time in Boston is temporary and his value is measured primarily in dollars saved rather than games won. That's the new NBA reality, and the Celtics are embracing it fully, for better or worse. Where do you stand on this whole situation? Should the Celtics prioritize financial flexibility over keeping talented players, or is this just ownership being cheap? Let me know in the comments what you think Boston should do with Simons, and if you're as fascinated by the business side of basketball as I am, hit that like button, and let's keep this discussion rolling.